Two words that can trigger any singer who's had a little bit of training. Soft palate. I know I've had quite the relationship with this part of vocal anatomy, and I sang for years without understanding how it actually functioned. In today's video, I'm going to show you how your soft palate works, simple ways you can manage it, and the significant impact it has on your resonance strategy. This is video 4 in the Vocal Tract Series. We've covered laryngeal neighborhood, anterior posterior narrowing with the tongue, managing pharyngeal constriction, especially medial lateral narrowing, and today we will get to your soft palate. And hi there, if you're new here, my name's Dan Callaway. I teach musical theater, voice, and vocal pedagogy at Boston Conservatory at Berkeley. More than 25 years kicking around on equity stages, more than 15 years helping singers get to work on Broadway, national tours, regionally and around the world. And I'm very glad you're here with me today. The word palate comes from the Latin palatum and literally means the top of your mouth. So you have your hard palate, which you can feel all cartilagey behind your top teeth, the roof of your mouth, and if you run your tongue backward, you can feel where the hard palate becomes soft tissue and the cartilage ends. That is your soft palate. It's a mobile structure that can move in all manner of directions. It primarily separates the oral cavity from the nasal cavity and directs food and liquid down toward the esophagus rather than allowing it into the nose. It regulates the shape of our air passage as we breathe through both the nose and the mouth. And as you know, as a user of your voice, it plays a crucial role in speech sounds. When it raises, it closes access to the nasal cavity, so it directs resonant activity into the oral cavity. And when it lowers, vibrating air can move through the nasal cavity. So here I'm using mostly oral cavity resonance, except for consonants like N, M, and NG, that requires nasal access. And here, if I let the soft palate generally drop, you'll hear that vibrating air is moving through my nose. These sounds are dictated by the coordination of the soft palate. We learn to speak and absorb sounds so unconsciously that becoming conscious of the soft palate's role in singing and sound making can be an awkward journey. But once you've mapped some things into your procedural memory, you'll find that the movement of your palate is very responsive to gentle cues. So if you just think about how anything that makes waves, in this case sound waves moving air molecules, how wave patterns behave, you can visualize how the position of the soft palate will affect the sounds you make and the feelings you have. If the soft palate is high, there is more resonant space, so the waves will be a little roomier. If the soft palate comes low, there's less space, a lower ceiling for the resonant space, so the vibrational activity is more compressed and you'll get a lot of high frequency bounce. And you'll have uses for both higher and lower palate positions. Remember, if you can make a sound sustainably and repeatably, there is information in that sound. We build new knowledge onto current knowledge, so all kinds of sounds have information for you and for other sounds. I might want a relatively high palate for time and again I would try to say all I'd want you to know. And I might want a lower palate for I like everybody that I ever met. That's I Like Everybody from The Most Happy Fella by Frank Lesser. That's a beautiful score if you don't know it already. The soft palate also has a tremendous influence on the pharynx. In fact, some velar muscles overlap with and are considered pharyngeal muscles as well. So velum or velar also refers to the soft palate. It comes from, I think, the word for veil in Latin. In the last video, I told you that the constrictor muscles of the pharynx can only do one thing, and that is constrict, and that we have to train them to soften to allow resonant space. But if we don't soften them in concert with the muscles of the soft palate that move the pharynx, then we'll still lack agency in our ability to choose the resonances we want. So to explain this, I'm going to introduce you to two primary muscle families that move the soft palate and pharynx. Okay, so the first family, two muscles, the palatoglossus, palato, palate, glossus, tongue. palatoglossus, and palatopharyngeus, palatopalate, pharyngeus, pharynx, palatopharyngeus muscles. The palatoglossus muscle connects the soft palate with the root of the tongue. The palatopharyngeal muscle joins the soft palate with the walls of the pharynx. Palatoglossus, so the palate to tongue root muscles, raises the back of the tongue and lowers the soft palate for swallowing. So go ahead and swallow and give some attention to those muscles on the sides of the back of your tongue, palatoglossus. It's also very useful for intonation, vowel shaping, bringing in bright color, higher frequency into the tone. So a lot of times I'll be using that to raise the tongue, lower the palate a little bit to give me a little bit more quack or divergence in the shape, if that's what I'm going for. The palatopharyngeal muscles are huge in their role. They form this beautiful arch from the back of your hard palate and descend to insert mostly at the back of your thyroid cartilage. So that's the cartilage around your vocal folds. That's quite an extensive muscular influencer. It raises the larynx for swallowing, and it also elevates the soft palate in order to close the pathway to the nasal cavity for swallowing and speech sounds. In the other muscular family of the soft palate, you have the levator veli palatini. Levator veli palatini. So just like elevator, it is a lifter of the soft palate. Levator and veli from the Latin for veil, and palatini, palate. So you are lifting and lowering the veil of the palate from your mouth to your nose. You can feel it at work if you do a surprise breath, where you can feel the cool air on your soft palate. In Linklater work, they do this reverse K inhale, and that's a good way to feel it too. So it kind of drives me out, but, and so that's that little Linklater inhaled K. And I also learned, I had a terrific student who'd grown up in Norway, and I learned that when in Norway and a lot of Scandinavian countries, or I think Iceland as well, when they give an affirmative or agreement statement, they'll say on an inhale. So there's just this sharp inhale, or even, there's like the audible inhale is a sign of agreement in Norway. So I think that's so interesting because you're literally taking in the agreement to what someone else is saying. So those are 3 ways you can feel the levator palatini at work. The levator is more of like a central lifter of the palate, sort of like the Gothic arch image of the palate that you hear in a sound like, a dream that will need all the love you can give every day of your life for as long as you live. So that's a really high, that's the levator palatini, lifting up my palate. And the palatopharyngeus, the big arch, it can play more of a nuanced role of widening or narrowing the arch. So you'll hear that work in higher mode 1 sounds like Your Love by the Outfield. I think so. I'm going to widen the palate. Josie's gone on a vacation far away. Come around and talk it over. So that palate is kind of spread wide and high through that whole thing to maintain that mode. Or in like higher tenor situations in a Western classical style, I find a lot of width in the soft palate actually helps. So something like this little passage from Che gelida from La Bohème. So I'm really giving a lot of stretch. If I don't give it that width, let's see what happens on a. So that feels narrower to me. The width of the palate gives me a little bit more resonant bloom. So I'll show you the difference. Levator, and then the, what is it called? Palatopharyngeus, yeah. Yeah, so you can feel that sort of blooming out of the soft palate. That helps that to have a little bit more ring and brightness, a little bit more freedom actually too, because I'm actually increasing the space, so I give the vibration a little bit more room to bounce around rather than being more compressed. In my experience, I am using a wider opening of the soft palate to support that acoustic environment. So you could just hear that change in the shape of the palate from kind of like the Gothic arch tall feeling to a wider one. If I just change the shape of the palate lift, and you'll hear the difference. So I'll start with a sort of taller levator engagement and then widen out using the palatopharyngeus and other muscles. So that will also assist with that. So if I go, we'll do an A flat. Let me get an onset. So there's a little shift in the acoustic there. When I engage the palatopharyngeus, it also, I think it raises my larynx a little bit. Yeah, it raises the larynx a millimeter or two, so that also brightened the sound. So remember, it's rolling swallowing. It brings up the larynx. So that also happens a lot of times automatically when we're widening out the soft palate lift. If I use some laryngeal depressors to keep the larynx steady, let's see if you still hear an acoustic shift. So this will be my soft palate, and I'll just mark my larynx position. Yeah, there's still an acoustic shift. So play with these things. For the wide and out opening, you may have heard teachers use the idea of a smile in the back of your molars, things like that. You probably saw my face change too when I'm probably engaging these zygomatic muscles. They're not necessarily connected, but I think that sort of helps the idea. But it's pretty nuts when you see all the intricate things that integrate in the vocal tract. And it also helps you appreciate how close together and nuanced everything is. So maybe you'll give yourself a little break as you learn to coordinate them, because they're really close and really tricky sometimes. So it takes time. So give yourself a lot of compassion and patience as you move ahead. So now you know the soft palate's role in directing the breath train. So you have two tracks, the nose or the mouth. If it's up against the back of the pharynx, breath will move through the mouth. If it's completely lowered down, as it is when we're breathing with the mouth closed, breath will move out through the nose. So when it comes to inhaling, you can go either way depending on the time you have or the kind of phrase you're about to sing, as far as your inhale, either through the mouth or through the nose. If you're going to have a helpful intake through the mouth, though, the soft palate will want to float up. I often pretend there's like a little button here at my chewing muscle, my masseter muscle. I'll press it, the jaw gently lowers, and a breath comes in. So I'll blow out, I'll press my little button. But notice how your soft palate automatically, reflexively lofts in order to let breath enter the airway. If you intentionally let the soft palate sag a little, you'll hear how inhalation is more difficult. So I'll let my soft palate sag. Here it is low. So if you can subtly feel the loft of the soft palate on the inhale, you can often maintain the gentle muscular coordination during the outflow. And you can also experiment with palate location with unvoiced breathing and note the effects. So again, the loft is quite open and gentle. If I lower my palate, so that's really just soft palate affecting that. And if you breathe out through the mouth with a high floaty palate, you'll hear a quiet exhale. So I'll breathe in and here's out. Yeah, so if you breathe across a lowered palate, I'm going to lower the palate and breathe out. The change in space pressurizes the air molecules, and you get some sound waves happening just by the change of the soft palates. So think about how that applies when we add vibration from the vocal folds. Pretty big deal. And there will be times when we want a high and lofty palate, providing more space, a larger resonant room, and therefore less air and vibrational pressure. And there'll be times when we want the palate to lower for various effects, which will bring the ceiling lower, creating more intensified vibration and pressure. So just like you heard how the soft palate affects how breath flows in and out, it also has a tremendous effect on our registration and resonance strategy. Being able to let our palate consistently float high is going to be important for allowing acoustic space for registration, shifts, and transition. So I'm thinking of Not the Only One by Sam Smith. Brutal song, but if you got, I think it's something like, You say I'm crazy. So if I'm coming down, if I'm switching mode and crazy, you say I'm crazy. 'Cause you don't think I know what you've done. So I'm going to keep the loft in that palate in order to smooth that descent. If I intentionally collapse it, you say I'm crazy. So if the palate descends quickly, and sometimes it will because it's thinking of the note descending, so the palate will want to come down. So you have to float it up as you descend. You say I'm crazy, crazy. So you want to sort of navigate that, but if I let the palate collapse, it'll yodel probably unintentionally. You don't think I know what You don't think I... That's just me letting the palate hang out and just collapse. So I need that space in order to navigate mode 1 through that zone. But letting it collapse abruptly can also help us with cracks and yodels when we want to employ those things. So if I just sing an E vowel on my favorite E4, I think that's E4, I'll start with a higher palate and then collapse it, and you'll see. So I go E. So just the movement of my palate shifts registration from mode 1 to mode 2. And this is important to know because sometimes we'll have abrupt shifts in registration when we add articulation. And that's because the palate is collapsing when we're producing consonants. So we have to watch that. It's coordinating, letting the palate float while we're articulating in front of it. It's a big thing. And I remember I really crashed on the rocks of this before I understood that independence and interdependence of function. But if I want to employ a yodel, like a Brandi Carlile moment, so if I want to go, did I go on a tangent? So that I collapse my palate to get that little yodel into on. Did I go on? I kept it up. Did I go on? I just let it collapse a little bit to create that yodel. So that's really the technique for doing that, is a little abrupt yodel collapse. I'm changing the vowel a little bit and I'm lowering, go on. Well, just the lowering of the palate affects the vowel. Changing the vowel a little bit and I'm lowering the palate to disrupt and change the registration. Or just your basic yodel, yeah. Yeah. So I'm using E's and Oo's, but I'm also sort of dropping that palate to create a pressure back to the folds. It's creating an acoustic environment back to the folds that is encouraging them to let go and release into mode 2. My dad always used to yodel in the car, so you pick these things up when you grow up in the hills. So awareness and agency with your soft palate also helps your resonance remain in the same neighborhood and not have abrupt tract changes from mouth to nose. So I hear this a lot on E vowels when there's a nasal consonant waiting at the end of a syllable, or when folks are trying to produce resonant sensation in the mask. So maybe something like somewhere that's green. Yeah, it's a G. So if Audrey's singing, a matchbox of our own, a fence of real chain link, a grill out on the patio, disposal in the sink. Yeah, so that's kind of extreme, but that happens a lot of times where you've got the E vowel or the E vowel of link and sink, and you've also have an N waiting at the end of that syllable. So it shifts the resonance kind of abruptly, and the ear's like, wait, is that the same character? So if the palate gets to float and oral cavity sounds will happen, it'll go, a matchbox of our own, a fence of real chain link. So there you even map through like, oh, chain link. Oh, there the palate's dropping for the nasals, and then it floats right back up. A grill out on the patio. I'm getting a little tight. A grill out on the patio. Disposal in the sink. Yeah. Like I always say, you can make any sound. If it's a sound you can comfortably repeat over and over, it's a sound that has some information. So I may play a character who has a collapsed palate most of the time, but you can feel how you're mapping that sense of collapse in the voice, and it's got some whine to it. Or I may play a character with a cold and I block all access to my nose in order to mimic the feeling of having a blocked nose. I actually did a production of Cinderella, and Deirdre Friel, who's a terrific actor, she's doing a lot of TV. She was one of the stepsisters, and she decided that the reason that she was so miserable was because she had a perpetual cold. So she was very funny. But yeah, independently managing the palate is going to be crucial for you to shape the tract and be confident with registration and resonance outcomes. And just do a lot of psychological investigation about where the palate is and what that says about the psychology, the ego identity of the character. So usually a higher palate will denote a belief in high status. So I mentioned Christine Baranski in The Gilded Age last video. That would be an example of a high palate. Or if someone's like trying to be super alpha, you'll hear it in concert with a pretty forced down low larynx as well. Like my palate's really high. I'm trying to assert my alpha status. And a lower palate can denote a feeling of lower status or maybe helplessness or powerlessness. So like whining sends this message, I need you just to do something for me. Or like the weaselly like royal advisor who pretends to be servile by plotting in the background. Or maybe like the helpful customer service rep. You've got like, so your room's on the 5th floor. Here's the Wi-Fi code and breakfast starts at 7:30 in the cafe. You know, so those palates are all finding sort of like a medium to low place to communicate it. I think that's really interesting to think, where is that person's palate living in relationship to who they believe they are or who they're trying to present themselves as? Yeah, so just keep an ear out for where you hear palate positions showing up. It tells you a lot about the identity belief of the voice user, and it's a hugely helpful question when you're discerning sounds for yourself. And here are some very simple ways you can work with your soft palate and get to know its function well. So there's the Linklater inspired inhale that we talked about. You create a K feeling and you inhale. So you may feel cool air along the palate and uvula, and then you sigh while maintaining that shape. So feeling the loft of the palate continuing through that vowel. And then you can change the vowels and pay attention to the gentle rise of your soft palate against your pharynx and notice how the air is traveling through the mouth. So, hey, he, ho, and so on. You can play with all kinds of vowel shapes and see how the vowel shapes relate to the float and rise of the soft palate. And truly, before I say anything more about the soft palate and its muscular coordination, if you're just aware of where you're directing the air, through the mouth or through the nose, that goes a very long way in adjusting the palate. Then you're not as prone to over-muscling all the coordinating and relating muscles. If you're thinking about the result of the path of air, that often just directs the palate automatically, I have found. If you feel like you're getting some nasality in your sound that you want to take out, a little nose pinch will alert you as to when that's happening. So remember, M, N, N, G, they need to come through the nose. So speaking of noses, yeah, we'll do that. I'm just thinking nose because of Pinocchio, right? When, see, it wants to come through my nose, yeah. When you wish upon a star. I think that's the melody. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't love doing that, but it's very helpful for folks. It's a really good way to bring attention to where the air is going. So I have colleagues that use little spongy nose clamps all the time, and they get a lot of success out of that. So that's something to check. One of my favorite and clearest exercises to use is just a fun nasal and oral cavity train track switch. So you can use any scale or phrase. You just alternate between vibration moving through your mouth or vibration moving through your nose. So you can literally just take like a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 scale and sing ah. And let's say I want to feel the difference. I'll start with nasal and then I'll go to oral cavity. Yes, I'll go ah. Literally just that switcheroo can acquaint you with how this is coordinating in order to move air either through the nose or through the mouth. It makes it very clear. Or you can even just take a phrase of a song. So if you do something like hands, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, eyes and ears and mouth and nose. That's weird, right? Head, shoulders, knees and toes. So just silly stuff like that will really acquaint you with, oh, air's moving through my nose, palate's down. Air's moving through my mouth, palate's up. It's literally, that's funny because like you're saying, anyway, it's a good little brain teaser, right? Trickier than I anticipated. So as we talk about all these movements of the soft palate, you may understand more why teachers use images like cathedral domes, parachutes, hot air balloons. When you begin to understand your own singing physiology, you can then create images that are helpful for you. The vocal structures are so close and nuanced that imagery can often be a very gentle and helpful way to help them move into useful coordinations. But I think it's important and helpful to know why, how an image relates to your physiology. That's always been helpful to me anyway. So I know you're already putting pieces together, how the coordination of your palate shows up in different styles. My friend Joe in the comments on the last video shared that he uses some Billy Joel songs as vocal calibrators. So the song Honesty by Billy Joel especially. So what is Billy Joel's palette doing there, especially in like a lot of the 1970s stuff? So a lot of his sound has a medium height palette in my ear. So if you've got like, honesty is such a lonely word, honesty, that palette's quite low. Honesty is such a lonely word is kind of the shape that he's making. If I raise the palette, honesty is such a lonely word. I mean, that's a sound you can make too. If I lower it, honesty is such a lonely word. So kind of that medium. Honesty, such a lonely word. Not sure if I'm in the key, but you get the idea. You can play with palette level. You can just play, what if I go really high? What if I go really low? And just see what the elevation or lack thereof of your soft palate, see what effect it has. And then you can just start to calibrate from there. I have another video about Western classical technique compared to musical theater singing that you can check out. And that goes into a lot of the differences in vocal tract shape. But notice it's not one palette plays for one style. It can move in many different ways within style and genre and responds to your emotional reality and sharing. So just keep an ear and a feel out. Your soft palate is super mobile. It can do a ton of things. It affects your breath movement, your resonance strategy, the structure of your pharynx, and your registration outcome. It can also position itself according to your psychological state and perceived identity. The way to build facility with this is to play, make different voices, pretend to be different people, keep an ear out for how different people talk wherever you go. Where's their palate? What does that say about their self-perception? Being curious about this creates a very quick circuit that helps you become stylistically versatile. Even watching people that do impressions online, some of your favorite impression people, just watch their body energy shift just like a split second before they begin to speak or act. You'll see there's like an ego shift in the person, like from behind the eyeballs. And that's really, I think it's very much the same muscle as stylistic shift in singing. We're just singing in different dialects through different identity lenses. So we're going to finish up the tract series in the next video talking about the top of your tongue, the dorsum, your jaw, and your embouchure, how your lips and cheeks play a huge role in resonant shaping. There's also access to free modules in the resource library for you to check out. So there's one on messa di voce and how to prove to yourself where resonance really happens. So 2 different modules that relate directly to what we were talking about here. So check that out and get yourself into the resource library. We are still in summer beta mode, so join us and tell us what you need. And most of all, please remember, there is only one you, and somebody would love to hear the story that only you can sing. Love much. Now go sing.